up next is a session titled Rebelling Against Traditional Learning Through Ed Delivery Models, and that's brought to you by Ben Starsky, Program Manager of Machine Learning at University at Amazon, Patrick Rossol Allison, Head of ASU Local at Arizona State University, and it's moderated by Christine Holzem, Vice President of Information Technology for the Federal Reserve. Thank you. So grateful for all the work you all are doing. Please enjoy the rest of the sessions today and your third day tomorrow. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you very, very much for that introduction. All right, let me find my notes here. So we are gonna go through just a couple of introductions, and then I will start asking questions of Patrick and Ben. So Patrick Rossol Allison spends his time working on creative solutions that challenge the higher education system to extend high quality opportunities to more students. As head and co-founder of ASU Local, he completely redesigned the university experience so that underserved students succeed in areas that we know matter: college, career, and life. He believes scalable redesigns like ASU Local are necessary in order to bring about change in the higher education system, as opposed to focusing on incremental change that merely adds expensive and non-scalable components to the existing broken models and requires Herculean and rarely successful change management efforts to scale. He previously led a nationwide effort to assess and drive the effectiveness of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's signature initiative, Frontier Set, which includes colleges, universities, and state systems representing more than 1 million students. Before moving to Seattle, he led strategic planning, accreditation, and research efforts, as well as the nationally recognized National Higher Education Benchmarking Institute at Johnson County Community College in the Kansas City metro area. And Patrick is joined by Ben Starsky. Ben focuses on the art and science of crafting high-quality, self-sustaining learning experiences in the classroom, online, blended, and asynchronous. He has worked in the nonprofit to higher education and corporate space, identifying innovative approaches to authentic, safe, and applied content that scaffolds learners from where they are to where they want to be. Ben is currently a program manager for Machine Learning University, a technical training program at Amazon that recently made classes available to the public on YouTube. Originally from Pittsburgh, go Steelers, Ben lives in Seattle with his wife, a middle school teacher, and daughter. When he's bored, he pretends to write his PhD dissertation. And hi, I'm Christine Holzem. I am a vice president with the Federal Reserve Banks, and I currently am running agile transformations from traditional mindset and skill sets and practices to agile delivery and product management across all of the Federal Reserve banks. I'm also a student working on my master's in decision analytics, so very interested to hear what you gentlemen have to say. Let me set some context for the first question and turn it over to you. So Ben and Patrick, colleges and universities in the United States simply cannot know when they will open again to normal activity, to what extent education as usual will resume. Even before COVID, employers were complaining that they were not getting enough of the talent they need, like computer science, machine learning, and data science. Could you talk a little bit about STEM versus social science? Is only knowing Python or some other language good enough, or do we demand more? And Ben, I'd like to start with you.
Sure, that's a wonderful question to start us off with. I think, you know, what we need to acknowledge here and the role of higher education is really thinking about you know, whether it's a public or a private good. I mean, I think your point there in terms of like the social sciences versus Python, super important conversation. And I think that there's been a debate, right, that, you know, for part of the 20th century, public institutions were this like public good, and that they've gotten away from that, right, over the last course of the last 30 years, you know, that somehow they've gotten away from that. But I really want to challenge that notion and think about the fact that, you know, really higher education in the United States was set up really to be for folks who were wealthy, were elite, right? They weren't actually set up for the masses. That was really a 20th century post-World War II construct, right? And so we need to realign and reinvest in public education. Yes, you should be able to, be able to write a cogent argument. Yes, you need to know Python, or many folks need to know Python. But I also want to think deeply about how to vote intelligently, identify misinformation, and think critically. Those are in service to society and humankind, as well as employers or people's careers. So I think it's one of those things where we're going to need to, as a society, identify what is the role, what is the purpose of higher education in the U.S. And we've really never gotten to that. We have this contradictory back and forth, right? And I think that it deserves really deep study of the history of higher education to answer that question comprehensively. I'd love to hear more about Patrick's thoughts on this.
Yeah, and thank you, Ben. And it's so funny because I'm actually a political scientist who had taught himself code and then went back into higher education. So, I mean, the notion that there's a linear career path is ludicrous, actually, these days. And so you actually have to learn how to learn. Like, that is the most important thing. You have to master learning, and that will carry you through all kinds of changes. COVID, technology changes that are going to come, political upheaval, you name it. Like that will prepare you far better for changes that are to come. I do want to, since we're talking about STEM here, I do want to talk a little bit about, the unbelievable issues that we actually have in this area around, equity. Race, ethnicity, gender, those are big deals in both cases. And so I think if you're a human being who believes that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not, then that actually will lead you to two very specific points, which is that at the university level or at the college level, we must do things differently. And then it also will lead you to the place where you will say, well, there are things that we must do differently when we hire, when we develop, when we promote in the workplace. Like you cannot have one without the other. And so that all then leads me to my conclusion, or the conclusion of my life, which is the point of view that you actually have to rebel against how things have been traditionally done, because otherwise they will not change. And I'm happy to share some of those examples here with you today. But it is not enough to just complain about that things are unequitable. You have to do something.
Oh, thanks for that. And yeah, you've both been rebels somewhat. Ben, you chose to leave the traditional public university system, and Patrick, you chose to stay in, but take more of an entrepreneurial role. Both of you are innovating. How are both of you attempting to modify the system?
Yeah, so maybe I can start on this one. So first of all, I think we have to acknowledge, like, while I'm a rebel, I'm also seeing, okay, what is education, or what is particularly higher education doing right? So I think one area that immediately pops into my mind is this incredible focus on long-term innovation. So taking longer-term risks, tackling difficult problems that don't have an obvious answer. So be it global warming, homelessness, issues of equity, breakthrough technologies in science and technology, the arts. So I think that's really where a lot of the value of higher education is coming in. And then I think maybe to Ben's point earlier on, things that we need to change. Oh my goodness, there are a few. So I literally saw maybe a week ago a picture that was or a painting that was painted in the Middle Ages that showed a lecture hall. And if you look at that picture and you compare it to what you see nowadays, not that much has changed there. And that is despite the fact that we know that learning experiences in lecture halls are actually terrible. And so that's one example of many examples that I could name where we really have to do something much differently.
Right. I agree, and I think the other part of that is that I see that from the perspective of like the importance of teaching, right, and in the importance of teaching in a new environment where we are replicating some of these same things, and we've seen that right in COVID, right? So we've seen where, you know, we've allowed mediocre instructors, people just emulating a model that's been passed down for hundreds of years, right? And pre-COVID, we got a pass on that, right? You could sweep that poor classroom performance, the underwhelming course materials, you could just sweep that under the rug. But right now in the COVID era, right, like on Zoom, that's being exposed and is extremely raw right now. And so I think what I would call out, what I'd want to refocus and prioritize is what happens in the classroom, in the laboratory, on Zoom classes, the internship, in workshops, right? And so holding high standards for teaching, right? That, you know, encouraging institutions, administrators, faculty to make decisions that support learning and teaching as like the #1 priority, right? That research is important, that new student unions are fun, college sports are exciting, but that really what we need in now and in the future are rock stars in the classroom in front of students or on Zoom, you know, wherever that may be. And I think that, you know, that's part of thing that we're kind of learning through this process, right? That things are really awful right now, but that maybe we need to reinvest in the primary focus of like learning as the priority.
And if I may, oh yeah, go ahead, Christine.
No, go ahead, Patrick.
So I think one thing that we're also learning right now is that how important the concept of a community is around education. Because if you, if you ask students right now, like what they're most, what they're dreading, what they're missing, it's that connective glue that they do actually get on a college campus. And that they do get from participating in all kinds of activities that are broadening, you know, their mindsets, where they learn something that they perhaps didn't expect to learn. You know, it's no coincidence that a lot of companies were actually found, you know, created on college campuses. And so I think that you know, concept of community is really important, and that's what we're all craving right now, right? I think everybody can relate to that. So I don't want to underestimate that. In fact, we actually see big differences in student retention when that element of community is absent.
Yeah, that's very important. And please, folks on the Zoom, please put your questions in the chat box and we'll read. We have a question from Howard. Really good point. Where will the funding come from to make learning the priority? Don't sports help fund education?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when it comes to funding, I mean, there are always there are like two basic mechanisms. Two basic mechanisms. One of them is we open the spigot and we pour a little bit more onto the existing system, and we fund new pet projects through that that ultimately don't scale because the financial model essentially doesn't scale. And the second piece is that we look at our existing resources, and not just funds, but also like people, like skills, assets that we have, and we reconfigure them. We actually take the bold step and reconfigure them in a way that you know, delivers better learning experiences. And so it's, you know, sports are definitely, you know, a fun, you know, experience. You know, I like sports. But at the end of the day, we shouldn't wait for more funding to come from somewhere. We need to act with the resources that we have, because otherwise, you know, we'll always get stuck in this loop of asking for more funding and hoping that that somehow magically solves all of the issues.
Ben, anything to add for that before we go to the next question?
No, I think that Patrick summed it up quite well. I agree. And I think that the other piece of that is like kind of avoiding, you know, sort of this wait and see approach and acting with a sense of urgency is super important. And I think that that's, you know, hopefully we'll be able to get further into this later on in the course of the discussion.
You know, sometimes in corporate life, we're starting to see, you know, the popularity of certificate types of programs. And I'm curious to get your thoughts from both of you on the value proposition of 4-year degrees versus various trainings like Google certificates or other certification programs.
Right. Yeah, thanks. That's a really great question. I mean, I think that, I see COVID as an accelerant to a number of trends, and we had been seeing this, prior, right? And, this is kind of like tracking a response, right? That there wasn't the pipeline and the supply of folks in STEM or, machine learning, data science, whatever, right? And that these, corporate institutions or whatever, felt like they needed to step in and respond to the lack of supply. And, I think that that's great. I think that there's a lot to be done in this space. I think that I see what Google has done with their cert and the claim that they've made. And, for those of you, not following really closely in this field, Google has stated that, if you take their certs, their online certs, that they'll consider it the equivalent of a 4-year degree. But I think that somewhere that Patrick and I, and probably many folks on this call would agree, is that like the 4-year degree will remain the gold standard, at least for the foreseeable future, right? But I think that the key here is, right, whether or not the business world, corporate training, Google's certs, what we're doing at Amazon, what they can do is whether or not that they can create pathways, or they can partner with traditional, university and credentialed providers, right, to craft stackable learning experiences that scaffold folks from sort of like the Google cert, or even what we're doing with YouTube, towards that 4-year degree, while providing them applied skills for where they are right now and where they want to get in the future. And I think that that's really, we haven't really landed there yet. I mean, I think I try to keep my ear close to the ground. I'm not sure if that's really been developed yet. I mean, I'm really excited by what the folks at it's outlier.org. I'm super excited about the work that they're doing in terms of taking really high production values and adapting this kind of Netflix style series to their lectures. I think that's super innovative, trying to really bubble up the theme of this entire summit, right? I think that's very cool, and it addresses some of the things that Patrick has called out previously, right? In terms of funding models and the cost structure and how we're supporting these folks, and really reshaking the deck in a rebellious way, right? And not waiting for this to just kind of happen, right? So I'm very excited about those opportunities and those things that are coming out of private-public partnerships. Patrick, do you have anything else to add to this?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I would say that I definitely see the value in industry type certificates, and I think they can provide employees with a great like short-term boost, especially like if somebody wants to get into wants to get a promotion, wants to get to the next step, then I think they're definitely valuable. And there are lots of examples of partnerships there. We at ASU we have a big partnership with Starbucks, with Uber. With Adidas and others. So there are definitely some models that are really interesting in that area. Now, one argument that sometimes comes up, and Peter Thiel is very vocal about, or has been very vocal about this in Silicon Valley, the founder of PayPal. He's been very vocal about degrees not being needed anymore at this point. And I think he stands for a number of individuals that actually have or had lots of privileges, or in some cases have Ivy League degrees, Stanford degrees. And those are the individuals that are arguing that degrees shouldn't matter anymore. That's easy to do from a point of privilege, right. But I will tell you, I mean, the students that we're serving with the program that I'm leading, ASU Local, do not have the privilege to just give away their degrees or to not get a degree. And the data are very, very, very clear in terms of what it means to have a degree and what that means for all kinds of things like income, like health outcomes, and so on and so forth. The list is very long.
Right, and I think that's only again been accelerated with COVID. As I alluded to earlier, right? When we look at the impact of COVID on folks with a high school diploma versus a college degree, their employment outcomes during COVID have been markedly different, and the recovery there is markedly different. So I agree with you, and I think that kind of sinks back or loops back to my earlier points about the public higher education model. Very much reflects certain values, and the idea that we should deconstruct it, right, or that we don't need it, right, after certain folks have become incredibly successful after benefiting from said system, is kind of odd to me. I agree completely. That's it's very odd and speaks of considerable privilege.
We've actually got a couple of questions in the chat, continuing along on this theme. Margot asked, how many months do you think it will take before families are unwilling to pay full fees for Zoom classes if this pandemic continues to create hybrid and remote learning for 24 to 36 months? And sort of following on that, Joel mentions, if you would speak to the impact of 10 to 20% of private schools permanently closing due to COVID, due to lack of revenue.
Go ahead,
Patrick,
Ben.
do you want to
I
start or
definitely have
shall I?
opinions. You go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thanks,
Just
Patrick.
poke the
I think,
handbrake.
yeah, I think, you know, how many months do you think it will take? I mean, it's already started, right? I mean, we saw this in the spring. And I think that I alluded to this earlier in the sense that it's laid raw kind of the problems with a number of folks, whether they be on campus or elsewhere, right? And their pedagogical style and the lack of importance and the lack of priority that's been given to classroom education. And I would say even beyond that, right, that it goes to the systems and the platforms that have supported these learning efforts, right? I mean, like you know, not to name the district, but you know, as it was introduced, my wife's a teacher and she's teaching remotely and she's using a platform that's woefully inadequate, right? We would never tolerate these gaps, right? Or these shortcomings in products or services if they were designed for anything else, right? You know, if it was, you know, flight control, you know, or anything supporting professional athletes, we'd say that's unacceptable. That doesn't meet the bar. Go back to the drawing board, you know, redo this, right? But, you know, somehow we've said, oh, that's okay, right? Because it's all right if we don't design this for learners in mind or for instructors in mind, right? The idea that she as a teacher is unable to see what her learners see, right? To walk the store or see the learner's experience, right? That's crazy. That's unacceptable in any other space.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I think that, you know, to get back to the question, I think that, you know, people are already fed up. And I think that, you know, Google is responding to this, right? That Facebook, Microsoft, a lot of these other orgs are attempting to respond to this. And, you know, I think maybe some of those efforts are a little, you know, half-baked in their own right. And hopefully that we can come out of this with a renewed effort and renewed, you know, innovation in this field where, you know, we'll have higher expectations of the learning experience, both in the classroom and online. You know, and I think that hopefully it'll strengthen some of these partnerships and some of these experiences. Patrick, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I recently listened to a great lecture online, by the way, that by an MIT professor, and he mentioned that there are like 3 basic modalities in learning right now. One of them is in person, the other one is online, and the third one is poorly done. So that you can do, I mean, I challenge you. I mean, there are plenty of really bad experiences in, you know, in the traditional system that we just don't see usually. That's what's different right now. And the other thing that's different right now is that a lot of people have taken their approach, you know, the various approaches that they followed in person, and they've just ported them into Zoom mostly,
Right.
or other worse platforms, not to mention what they are. And you know, you can do online really well. Like I will tell you, like at ASU, we've been engaged in online education. We have created entire like digital learning platforms where we produce degrees, where we produce content in a high quality way. So it can be done. We're just not seeing it very often. And so definitely want to highlight that.
And I think the other piece of this, Patrick, is that like it is like I think that the universal like truth about teaching, that good teaching looks like easy and seamless, right? But that it is actually insanely hard, right? Applies online as well, right? That, you know, good online teaching is also insanely hard. It's very difficult. It's very challenging. And I think that that goes for whether it's live instructor-led training or it's, you know, self-paced, you know, utilizing recordings, right? I mean, I think that was one of the learnings for my org, you know, during COVID. You know, we were offering instructor-led classroom-based training at Amazon. And, you know, our vice president said, like, well, okay, let's let's record these videos, let's get them out there, right? And it was like, whoa, do you understand what it's going to take to produce like high quality video recordings of this content? It's just not set up a webcam and click go. Like, this is way more complicated. And I think that I'm hopeful that people are realizing this, not only on the higher ed piece, but also on the K-12 scene, right? That teachers, good teaching is challenging and deserves our respect, right?
Mhm. I will actually tell you, disclose a little secret here, which is that compared to the lecture hall experience, you can actually create interactive content online that is much better, much better. So I think one of the things that we're going to walk away with from this COVID experience is that when online is done really well and interactive, then that's actually maybe here to stay in some cases. And then let's focus the in-person experiences on things that actually really matter.
That move the needle.
There is a reason why lots of students actually want to go back to campus. There is a reason for that. And it is not those lecture halls. It's actually it's the community. It's the meeting other individuals and learning from them and developing themselves. So that's actually the approach that we use to design the hybrid college model that is ASU local, where we essentially took, and this was before COVID, by the way, so we essentially deliver everything, like all the classes that students would typically take in person. We deliver them all digitally. And again, this is not like a Zoom experience. This is a really well produced experience. And then in person, we focus on building the community, on coaching. Coaching works extremely well in person, and or counseling works well in person. So we essentially focus on the things that can be really done well in person, and that makes a huge difference. I mean, in terms of the numbers that we have seen, I mean, we've retained 92% of our students during this time, which in higher education is pretty much unheard of. You look at maybe very selected classes at Stanford.
I'd like to take us back a little bit to something that both of you have talked about earlier in the conversation, and talk a little bit about what's the business world doing right to support diverse learners. How about non-traditional learners, including those who may not succeed in the traditional system? And Ben, maybe we'll go back to you.
Yeah, sure. So I think this is an extension of kind of the realization, that there's a new interest in the field of education and ed tech, right? That word has become very buzzy again, and I'm hoping that we can leverage it for good, right? And make some impact. And I think that there's, as I said earlier, there's some realization about the poor job that a lot of companies have done with products and services that support learners both internally and their customers, right? Whether they be school districts or universities. And I think that the key here will be that we start from a recognition of, again, that many of these systems were set up for particular groups of people, and they reinforce a lot of those values. And so I think that we'll need to make sure that there is an integration of values and a culture of attempting to do the right thing for the learner, right, rather than what is the most convenient thing. And so I think that there's at least some acknowledgement that these systems are broken, or that these services don't work the way that they should, or they're not hitting the quality bar. And I'm hopeful that means that there's significant change and innovation coming. I mean, I have not seen this much interest or attention to these issues like ever, right? I mean, I kind of see this almost as a Sputnik moment, right? That there is this moment of crisis, and that it's imperative for us to seize this moment to push things in the direction that we want to see it, right? Like, again, going back and coming to Patrick's like kind of opening statement, right? That like you are required to rebel against the system or nudge it in the direction that you want to see it go in, because otherwise there are other folks who will pull it in the direction that, in this moment of crisis, in the direction that they want to see. And so I do think that it's super important important for us to seize this Sputnik-esque moment, get investments in the places that are important to us personally, to us professionally, but us also as a society, right? That there were this is an opportunity for us, and that we shouldn't let it go to waste, as painful as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we go to Patrick, Lynn asks, are there any ed tech companies you're excited about, or any ed tech companies you wish were started?
Yeah, sure. That's a wonderful question. So one company, it's a startup right now. It's kind of it's stealthy, as I mentioned previously, is outlier.org. And their whole thing is, right, they've got this like Netflix-esque thing going on there, and it's super exciting, very riveting, right? I mean, you're going to keep watching your next lecture, right? Kind of, or episode, right? And they've got these characters, but I think that eliminating kind of the splashy, flashy, fancy stuff. What they've done there, though, is that they have partnered with the University of Pittsburgh, and I understand that they're looking to partner with other institutions. They do have some ties to Arizona State, or some former folks there, and they are actually offering accredited courses at community college pricing. And what I think is novel here, what's innovative here, is that you're taking rock stars, right? So folks who in front of the classroom, like I said before, these rock star people at MIT, at NASA, elsewhere, right, that would typically only be exposed to, very privileged folks at an exorbitant amount of money, right, for their credit hours, right? And they're, doing it at community college pricing, right? I think that that's super, super exciting. And then the other ed tech company that I really am intrigued by what they're doing, it's very close to the space that I'm at Amazon, is Kaggle. And they were acquired by Google fairly recently. And I really love what they're doing at Kaggle, because for those of you not familiar with sort of the ML, AI, data science space, right? So they've got a lot of stuff, whether it be learning Python, but also learning the fundamentals, right, of machine learning and understanding how to take a data set and be able to, craft a functioning model out of that data set, and really sort of crowdsourcing and making some competitive environments there, really emphasizing the community piece, as Patrick's talked about a number of times, as best they can, right, for an entirely online platform. And I do think that that's something that's motivating to people, right, is community, is competition, right, is public recognition. But I think the other part of it is that, like, it's free, and it's out there, and that you can engage with it on your time, in whatever environment you find yourself in. Patrick, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I'm actually only going to add one particular favorite that I want to share with people, and it's not really an ed tech company, so this may be interesting to people in business as well. So it's actually a company that is called so MMHMM, brilliant marketing, by the way, because you can't forget it. And what they have done is they've pretty much, they embrace this concept of in real life plus. So the notion that you can actually do certain things better online when done well than in person. And so what they do is they pretty much have developed this incredible platform that allows you to out of the box essentially engage with your audience much more than one could, on a Zoom here. So it's absolutely fascinating, and I'm obsessed with it. And they're in beta right now, so I'm still a little hesitant to release it upon our students. But I'm like secretively waiting for the time when the software is super stable. What you can do with it is incredible, and I think that's where we're going. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to an invite, Patrick.
That's right.
It was founded by the Evernote former Evernote founder and CEO. So that's who's behind it.
And Patrick, if you want to circle back a little bit to talk a little bit about non-traditional learners, that would be interesting for folks to hear.
Yeah. So when we say non-traditional learners, traditionally, we mean individuals who are already in the workforce, or who are looking to engage in education later on in life. I want to talk a little bit about non-traditional learners that are actually high school graduates, because non-traditional learners in that space, to me, are individuals who, because of the barriers that they have in their lives, whether that's financial or personal or circumstantial, because there's no opportunity around them. Those to me are the non-traditional learners that have been forgotten by not only our higher education system, but also by lots of companies that wouldn't hire them. And so those are the students that we've chosen to focus on, because we said, okay, we have this notion, again, that if you take care of some of the challenges that they're facing in their lives, and if you design a model around that they will actually do well, academically speaking. There's always this idea of, oh, they will never do well academically just because they don't have the ability to do so. And we fundamentally disagree with that. Again, I go back to what I said initially, which is that talented is actually equally distributed. And the problem is actually the systems that we've built around the talent, not the talent themselves. So, and yeah, I mean, again, you got to think outside of the box, and you got to think about, okay, what do those non-traditional students, what do they need to succeed at the same level, or even far beyond their peers, their more privileged peers.
We have a few more questions in the chat. How do you drag the tenured professors and teachers along the new technology paradigm, or do you boot them? Your thoughts, Ben?
Sure, that's a tough question. I mean, I was hoping you'd pitch this over to Patrick. I think he's probably got more and more increasingly experience with that. I have no tenured professors at Amazon. I have some like scholars who are former tenured faculty, and I mean, I think it's certainly a challenge. It's difficult, and I think that the key here is trying to elicit the best classroom teaching. I mean, I hate to continue to sound like a broken record, right? But it is bar raising performance, whether it's online or in the physical classroom. And I think that, again, my thing is, where are you delivering that? If you can deliver that in the classroom, that's great. Then let's create opportunities for that individual to do that in the classroom. If they can do it online, and we're going to provide them the opportunity and the training, and we're going to create, have specialist roles for folks to be able to scaffold them up and give them that, those opportunities. I think that's great. But I think it's, for me, there is a hard line that you've got to have teaching excellence somewhere, right? Whether you're tenured or not, whoever you are, I really think that's the priority, is excellence in a virtual classroom or a real one. Patrick?
Yeah, I think first, I think the first thing that you got to realize is that there are lots of tenured professors and teachers that actually want change to happen. I cannot tell you like how many times when I talk about what we're doing in Los Angeles, after the presentations, people will come up to me and will say, "I wish we could do that at fill in the blank institution." And so there are lots of people out there that want to make change. So I think very pragmatically, I'll give you one example. You identify the individuals who want to make change first, number one, and then you give them the opportunity, perhaps in a separate structure, sometimes that's necessary, to innovate. And you pour attention and resources, into their projects. And usually what happens is other people realize that and they're like, oh, this is interesting. Maybe I need to engage with it. And then you protect those structures because, sometimes you can get, there definitely no shortage of, individuals who want to see it fail and all that. But that's normal. That's true for almost any startup effort anywhere. So yeah, I think you have to do it though. And you have to do it boldly. Like you can't say, well, let's give them $10,000 and let's see what they do. Like you have to actually get out the big bucks and don't stop at the first barrier that they'll encounter. There'll be plenty of barriers, but or you could decide to just watch the existing system fail. You can do that too. I mean, it's a choice.
And Patrick, you mentioned before that coaching is done well in person. Are you seeing any best practices for doing coaching online?
Yeah, so initially, like when we, as I mentioned before, we're a hybrid model with some in person and some online. And so when COVID first came around, obviously we took the in person and we put it into the online space as well. And so one thing that we did learn was that, again, we had to become really good at coaching and teaching online. And from that, we learned a lot. Like we learned that you have to figure out like how do you make things interesting and exciting and different. So we did all kinds of things in the early days. Like we started virtual tours where we would swap out our Zoom backgrounds, and we would, we would have like art and music sessions online. We did all kinds of things. And yeah, you have to make it interesting. I mean, they adapt to the same style over and over again after a while, and they get bored. And so don't let people get bored. That's, I mean, it's like in-person teaching. Like the best teachers are teachers who can make things exciting and interesting. And then again, you don't notice that time goes by. I mean, you do the same thing. You do the same thing online.
Thank you so much. And I'll give each of you a lightning round chance to leave a final thought with the audience. Ben, I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think the big one here, and I think Patrick's kind of hit it a couple of times, is to test your assumptions. I mean, I think that even though that I tried to be innovative when I was at a couple of different institutions, traditional four-year institutions, with the types of assignments, the types of readings, podcasts I assign, the types of programs I designed and launched. I came into Amazon still with a number of preconceived notions about what works and doesn't work in education, whether it be professional, continuing, whatever. What I thought was funny was the previous panelists were reviewing like the concept of a hack, right? Like that you're hacking something, right? And that you're pulling forward new ideas, and you need to be open-minded, right? New ways of doing things, and obviously that culture is really big at Amazon, and so we've done a lot of this, right? And so in the 2 years that I've been at Amazon, we've done a lot of experimenting. We've tested a lot of new ideas. We've tested online courses. We've condensed 6-week classes into 5 days. We've opened up our classes to YouTube, right? Which is something that they, never thought would happen. We've eliminated barriers for new employees, right? And a lot of that was pretty radical, like super crazy for me coming from this traditional background at an institution, right? And I think the idea is that you have to exercise that consistently, right? That if you are unwilling to test your assumptions, right, either you will continue to see, the system fail, or you'll have blockers that will inevitably come up, whether they be funding or, ornery administrators who have, whatever, those sort of things will come up. So I think regularly testing your assumptions, hacking the situation, attempting to find novel approaches to better serve your learners, right, and your stakeholders, because as it turned out, right, like a lot of the things that I thought were so novel and so crazy for us at the university or even at Amazon, turns out that students loved it, right? When you have that direct pipeline of feedback from learners, from the folks you serve, you really can discover the types of things that will delight them and move the needle and result in outstanding performance in your program and the things they're trying to accomplish.
Thank you. And Patrick, how about you?
Yeah, I think, Ben, one thing that you mentioned that struck me is the importance of culture, and that the culture essentially promotes this type of hacker ethos, that you're not afraid to make changes and that you're willing to try different things. So that's one. And we've definitely done that by just creating a different part of the university and then specifically hiring for that, and that's made a huge difference. And then I think number two is an insight that's really important, and you often hear this from startups as well, which is that you have to understand what you're doing at an elementary level. Like you have to drill down into everything that you're doing and break any process, any service that you offer down to its component pieces, and you have to understand them, and then you can actually re-engineer what you're doing. It always strikes me, and this is maybe for individuals who are here from Seattle, and dare I say West Seattle, where I'm at right now. If you think about the bridge, the infamous bridge, and the effort and the amount that people put into understanding every single component of that bridge, because nobody wants it to collapse, then why the heck are we not doing that in our education systems? I mean, seriously, that will get us much further than one bridge. So,
Well, thank you, both Ben and Patrick. Really interesting talk this evening. I think we'll all be on the lookout for outliers, Kaggle, and hum in particular.